before my aunt could ask what I was doing. She slapped a name tag on my chest that read, Unemployed in bold letters. The banquet hall went silent for 3 seconds. Then the doors behind me opened, and my CEO walked in. He extended his hand and said, Director, everyone is waiting for you on stage. Watching her face go pale, I realized I had not been jobless for 10 years. I had just failed at being the disappointment they wanted me to be. My name is Stella Fox, and for the last 10 years, I have successfully avoided the suffocating gravity of my hometown. But standing here now in the lobby of the Maple Crest Hotel in Columbus, Ohio, I realize that gravity does not just pull you down, it crushes you. The air in the ballroom foyer smells of industrial-strength carpet cleaner, mixed with the cloying scent of roasted pork and cheap vanilla perfume. It is the smell of judgment. It is the smell of a Midwestern family reunion where affection is conditional and success is measured by how loudly you can brag about it over a plate of potato salad. I am nearly 30 years old. I am wearing a charcoal suit that costs more than my father's first car, tailored to invisible perfection, devoid of brand logos because in my world, the people who actually run things do not need to advertise who made their clothes. But here, under the unforgiving fluorescent lights of the hotel lobby, I am not a woman of substance. I am a suspect walking into an interrogation room disguised as a celebration. The jazz music filtering out from the main hall is generic and tinny, a looping saxophone track that seems designed to fill awkward silences. I tighten my grip on my clutch and step forward. The queue for the check-in table is moving slowly, a snake of cousins and distant uncles shuffling forward to receive their identity badges. At the head of the snake, manning the table like saint, Peter at the gates of a very beige heaven, is my Aunt Deborah Hale. Deborah has not aged so much as she has hardened. Her hair is a helmet of blonde lacquer, immovable and defying physics. She is wearing a pastel floral blouse that screams approachable matriarch, but her eyes are scanning the room with the precision of a sniper. She is holding a clipboard against her chest, hugging it like a shield. This is her domain. She organized this. She categorized us. She decided who sits near the stage and who sits near the kitchen doors. I watch her interact with my cousin Greg. She hands him his name tag with a beaming smile, patting his hand. Greg is a dentist. Dentists are safe. Dentists are good for the family brand. Then her eyes flick up and lock onto me. The smile does not drop, but the temperature of it changes instantly. It goes from warm to absolute zero in a fraction of a second. Stella, she says, her voice carrying over the low hum of conversation. You made it. We were not sure if you could afford the flight. The conversation around us stutters. Heads turn. This is how she does it. It is never an insult. It is always just concern. Just practical love. I smile back. A practiced expression I learned in boardrooms facing down hostile investors. I drove, Aunt Deb, it is good to see you. I reach out for my name tag, expecting the standard format. Name, relation. Maybe a fun fact if she was feeling whimsical, but Deborah does not hand it to me immediately. She holds it just out of reach, looking at it with a tilted head, feigning a moment of thoughtful consideration. I wanted to make sure everyone feels comfortable tonight, she says, loud enough for the uncles standing 3 feet away to hear. I know you have been struggling to find your footing since college. Stella, I did not want to put pressure on you by leaving it blank or making you explain yourself over and over again, so I took the liberty of filling it in for you. She turns the laminated card around. The bold black letters strike me like a physical blow. Stella Fox Unemployed, and right underneath it, in a smaller, italicized font that looks like a whisper of pity. Finding her way. The silence that follows is thick and heavy. It lasts for 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds stretch out into an eternity. I can feel the heat rising up my neck, not from shame, but from a sudden, violent spike of adrenaline. It is a biological fight-or-flight response, the primal urge to either flip the table or run out the automatic doors. Deborah smiles that sweet, poisonous smile. I just wrote the truth. Honey, no shame in it. We are family. We are here to support you, even when you have nothing. A ripple of laughter moves through the group behind me. It is not malicious laughter, which makes it worse. It is uncomfortable, relieved laughter. They are laughing because they are glad it is not them. They are laughing because Deborah has signaled that I am the designated failure of the evening, the lightning rod for all their collective anxieties about status and money. By labeling me, she has absolved everyone else. Just then, a voice cuts through the tension. It is loud, bright, and demanding of attention. Oh my God. Mom, stop roasting her. My cousin Madison appears from the ballroom, flanked by two other cousins who act as her permanent accessories. Madison looks exactly like what she is, a 24-year-old who believes she is the main character of reality. She is wearing a dress that is slightly too formal for a family reunion, something sparkly and camera-ready. Madison glides over, glancing at my name tag and letting out a short, sharp giggle before covering her mouth. Oh, that is savage. But seriously, Stella, do not worry. I am literally hiring for the new boutique right now. If you need shifts, I can totally fit you in. I need someone to handle stock in the back. She turns to the crowd, beaming. Did you guys hear the soft opening is next month? We are projected to break even in Q1. It is going to be insane. The attention pivots instantly. The relatives swarm Madison. Oh, look at her. The future business owner. The influencer. The golden child. They fawn over her, asking about her follower count and her interior design choices. I am forgotten. Or rather, I am remembered only as the shadow that makes Madison shine brighter. I am the before picture to her after. I stand there, alone in the center of the crowd, holding the plastic badge. This is the moment where the old Stella would have cried. The Stella of 10 years ago would have made a scene, or begged them to understand, or tried to explain that I actually work very hard. But the Stella of today does not explain. The Stella of today knows that explanations are for people who need permission to exist. I look at the word unemployed. I think about the last 72 hours of my life. I think about the sleepless nights in front of 3 monitors, the code I rewrote, the logistical architecture I built from scratch that saved a $300 million merger from collapsing. I think about the conference call I took in the car on the way here, negotiating terms that would make Aunt Deborah's entire house look like a rounding error on a spreadsheet. Slowly, deliberately. I lift the name tag. I unclip the safety pin on the back. My fingers are steady. I can feel the eyes of a few curious onlookers on me, waiting for me to crumble. I do not crumble. I pin the badge to the lapel of my charcoal suit. I press it down firmly until it is straight. If this is the role they have cast me in, I will play it. I will wear their ignorance like a medal. I look up and meet Deborah's eyes. She looks slightly disappointed that I have not run away. Thanks, Aunt Deb, I say, my voice flat and cool. I appreciate the honesty. I turn away from the table, stepping into the periphery of the room. The jazz music seems to have gotten louder, a chaotic backdrop to the murmurs of poor Stella, and what a waste of a degree that I can hear trailing in my wake. I find a spot near a potted fern, close to the frosted glass double doors that lead to the main hotel corridor. I need a moment. I need to breathe. My phone vibrates against my thigh. It is a single, long buzz, the specific haptic pattern I assign to only one sender. I slip the phone out of my pocket, shielding the screen from the prying eyes of a nosy uncle passing by with a plate of shrimp. The screen glows with a notification from the encrypted internal mail app. From E. Cole, subject update. I tap it open. The message is short. It is always short. Ethan does not waste words. Board approved the new Midwest hub. You are on. The contract is ready. I stare at the words. The Midwest hub. The project I pitched. The project I designed. The massive distribution center that is going to revolutionize logistics in this entire tri-state area. And I am the director. I am the one in charge. I look down at my chest. Unemployed. I look back at the phone. Director. The irony creates a strange, bubbling sensation in my chest that feels dangerously like laughter. They are celebrating a boutique that has not sold a single dress. funded by loans they probably cannot pay back, while standing next to the woman who just secured the infrastructure contract that will likely ship their inventory. I lock the phone and slip it back into my pocket. The room is loud, the clinking of silverware, the roar of family gossip, the high-pitched laughter of Madison holding court in the center of the room. They are so loud they do not hear anything else. They do not hear the heavy rhythmic footsteps approaching from the hallway outside. I am standing with my back to the frosted glass doors. I can feel a shift in the air pressure. Someone is walking toward the doors from the other side. Someone with purpose. Most people hesitate before opening a door into a party. They pause, check their reflection, adjust their tie. This person does not pause. The shadow looms large against the frosted glass, a tall, broad silhouette that grows sharply defined as it moves closer. I know that silhouette. I know the stride. I know the exact cadence of those footsteps because I have marched alongside them through crises that would make this family reunion look like a tea party. The double doors swing open. They do not creak. They simply give way to force. The noise in the lobby does not stop immediately. It takes a second for the presence to register. A cold draft sweeps in from the hallway, cutting through the stagnant warmth of the room. It carries the scent of fresh rain and expensive tobacco, a scent that does not belong in this room of potpourri and anxiety. One by one, heads turn. The laughter around Madison dies down. Aunt Deborah looks up from her clipboard, her mouth opening slightly in confusion. Ethan Cole stands in the doorway. He is not wearing a tie. He never wears a tie unless he is meeting the president, and even then, it is a maybe. He is wearing a black dress shirt with the top button undone and a suit jacket that looks like it was cut from the darkness itself. He is 6 feet and 2 inches of calm, terrifying competence. His eyes, the color of steel, sweep the room. He ignores the balloons. He ignores the buffet. He ignores the stares of my 50 relatives who are suddenly very aware that a wolf has just walked into the sheep pen. He spots me. He does not smile. Ethan does not smile when he is working, and he is always working. He walks straight toward me, parting the crowd without touching anyone. People instinctively step back, creating a path, sensing a hierarchy that has nothing to do with family titles and everything to do with raw power. He stops 3 feet away from me. He looks at the cheap plastic name tag on my chest. His eyes narrow for a fraction of a second as he reads the word unemployed. A muscle in his jaw jumps. Then he looks me in the eye. "Excuse me," he says, his deep voice carrying effortlessly to every corner of the silent room. "I need to borrow Director Fox for a moment. We have a contract to sign. To understand why the word unemployed pinned to the lapel of my charcoal suit feels less like an insult and more like a recurring theme. You have to understand Sundays in Columbus. You have to understand the specific architecture of my childhood, which was built not on bricks or mortar, but on potato salad, passive-aggressive compliments, and the absolute monarchy of my mother's side of the family. I grew up in a neighborhood of vinyl siding and chain-link fences, the kind of place where privacy was a concept that people heard about on television, but never actually practiced. In our subdivision, a Sunday meant smoke. It rose from 50 backyards simultaneously, a haze of burning charcoal and marinating pork that signaled the mandatory weekly gathering. We did not go to country clubs or galas. We went to each other's concrete patios to eat hamburgers that were always slightly charred on the outside and raw in the middle, and to consume the real main course, which was the business of everyone else. The hierarchy of our family was visible to the naked eye, if you knew where to look. Technically, my grandmother was the head of the family, but as her health began to fade into a fog of forgot names and trembling hands, the vacuum of power was filled instantly and ruthlessly by her eldest daughter, my Aunt Deborah. Deborah did not seize power with a coup. She seized it with a clipboard. She was the one who organized the potlucks. She was the one who decided who brought the ice and who brought the expensive meat. In a family that functioned on chaos, the person who holds the schedule holds the crown. Deborah became our unofficial prime minister, and her policy was simple. Image is everything. And if Deborah was the ruler, her daughter Madison was the crown princess. From the time we were toddlers, The narrative was set in stone. Madison was the miracle. She was the one with the blonde ringlets that bounced when she walked. She was the one who was lifted onto the picnic table to sing songs from the radio while the adults clapped and cooed. Madison is going to go far, they would say, nodding over their paper plates. Look at that smile. She is made for the cameras. And me, I was Stella. I was the cousin who was dark-haired, quiet, and disturbingly observant. I did not sing on tables. I was the one who noticed that the table leg was wobbly and found a piece of cardboard to wedge under it so Madison would not fall off. Nobody applauded the cardboard wedge. By the time we were 10, the rolls had hardened into cement. Madison was labeled the creative soul. I was labeled the practical one. In the language of my family, practical was a polite synonym for boring. It meant I was useful, but not interesting. I was the child who remembered where my uncle left his car keys. I was the one who sat with my grandmother and organized her pillbox because the colors confused her. I was the one who, at the age of 12, spent a Saturday afternoon sorting a shoebox full of my father's receipts because he was stressed about an audit, and I found the process of categorizing expenses strangely soothing. I remember one 4th of July barbecue distinctly. The heat was oppressive, the kind of humidity that makes your shirt stick to your back the moment you step outside. The adults were sitting in a circle of lawn chairs, drinking cheap domestic beer and wiping sweat from their foreheads. Madison, who was 14 then, was standing in the center, modeling a new dress she had bought with her allowance. "So, Maddie," my Uncle Ron asked, leaning back, "what is the plan for high school? You going out for the drama club? You have got to get that talent on stage." Madison twirled, the fabric flaring out. "Definitely. And choir. Mom says I should look into modeling classes too, just to build confidence." A chorus of approval went around the circle. "That is right. You have the height for it. Do not waste those looks. You are going to be our little star." Then, the conversation paused. My uncle's eyes drifted to me. I was sitting on the cooler, not because I wanted a cold seat, but because it was the only place left to sit. I was holding a stack of dirty paper plates I had just collected from the lawn. "And what about you?" Stella, Uncle Ron asked, his voice dropping an octave, losing that excitement. "What are you up to?" I opened my mouth to say that I had just finished a 300-page book on the history of the Transcontinental Railroad, or that I had taught myself how to fix the leaking faucet in the bathroom, because Dad kept forgetting. But before I could speak, Aunt Deborah chimed in. "Oh, Stella is being such a helper," she said, her voice dripping with that sugary condescension. "She spent the whole morning helping me chop the onions for the relish. I do not know what I would do without her extra hands. She is so good at the background work." That was it. That was my summary. I was the chopper of onions. I was the extra hands. I looked at my parents, Eric and Laura Fox. They were good people. They loved me, but they were soft people. They lacked the jagged edges necessary to fight a woman like Deborah. They saw peace as the highest virtue. "That is right," my mother said, smiling nervously. "Stella is very grounded. She is a worker. We do not have to worry about her head being in the clouds." My father nodded, taking a sip of his beer. "She will make a great administrative assistant someday. Or maybe work in a bank. Something steady. Stella likes steady." I tightened my grip on the dirty paper plates until the grease seeped onto my fingers. They thought they were praising me. They thought they were complimenting my reliability. But what they were actually doing was lowering the ceiling of my life until it was just a few inches above my head. They were deciding, right there in the humidity and charcoal smoke, that my maximum potential was to be a support system for someone else's glory. The defining moment, the memory that I replay whenever I feel my resolve weakening, happened when I was 16 years old. It was a Saturday night in late August. Aunt Deborah had decided to host what she called a family youth celebration. The premise was that the cousins were growing up fast, and she wanted to honor our achievements before the new school year started. In reality, it was a production designed solely to spotlight Madison. The living room was decorated with streamers. There was a cake. Deborah had even set up a makeshift podium using a music stand covered in a velvet cloth. We were all made to sit on the sofa, me, Madison, and 3 other cousins. Deborah stood at the podium, holding a stack of certificates she had printed on her home computer. She called up the cousins one by one. The boy who played football got the sportsmanship award. The cousin who had managed not to fail math got the academic improvement award. Then she came to Madison. Deborah paused for effect. She cleared her throat and beamed. "This next award goes to a young woman who brings light into every room she enters," she said. "Someone who has big dreams and the talent to match them. I am proud to present the Future Star Award to Madison Hale." Madison stood up, feigning surprise, and accepted a gold-painted plastic trophy that Deborah had clearly bought from a novelty store. The family clapped wildly. Flashbulbs from disposable cameras popped. Madison gave a little speech about how she just wanted to make everyone proud. I sat on the sofa, waiting. I knew I was not a star. I knew I did not play football, but I had straight A's. I was the editor of the school yearbook. I had just organized a fundraising drive that collected 2,000 cans of food for the local shelter. Surely, there was something for me. And finally, Deborah looked at me. And last but certainly not least, she said, her smile tight, "We have Stella." She reached behind the podium and pulled out not a trophy, not a certificate, but a small rectangular object wrapped in tissue paper. "Stella does not like the spotlight," Deborah explained to the room. "She is the quiet force, the one who makes sure the gears turn. Come here, honey." I walked up to the podium. My heart was pounding. I took the object. "Open it," someone shouted. I tore the tissue paper. It was a picture frame, a wooden frame from the dollar bin, with rough edges and peeling varnish. Inside the frame, where a photo should have been, Deborah had typed a sentence on plain white printer paper. It read, "Thank you for helping with the food prep." I stared at it. I read it again. "Thank you for helping with the food prep." Earlier that day, Deborah had asked me to come over early. She had handed me 5 pounds of potatoes and a peeler and said, "Get to work." I had peeled potatoes for 2 hours while Madison tried on outfits in her bedroom upstairs. That was my contribution. That was my legacy. The room was silent for a beat, and then my mother said, "Oh, that is so sweet. It is nice to be appreciated for the little things. The little things." I looked at Madison holding her gold trophy. I looked at my frame holding a sentence about peeling potatoes. I did not cry. At 16, I had already learned that crying in front of Deborah only gave her ammunition. Instead, a cold, hard knot formed in the center of my chest. It was the realization that in the economy of this family, I was the labor, and they were the management. I was the roadie, and they were the band. I smiled. It was the first time I used the smile that I would later perfect in boardrooms, a smile that revealed nothing and protected everything. "Thank you, Aunt Deb," I said. "This is very useful." I went back to the sofa and sat down. From that night on, I stopped trying to impress them with my grades or my projects. I stopped talking about the books I read or the complex systems I was interested in. I realized that any competence I showed would only be rewarded with more unpaid labor. If I showed I was good at math, they would make me do their taxes. If I showed I was good at organizing, they would make me plan their anniversaries. So I became a ghost. I retreated into the background, exactly where they put me. I became the girl who was just there. I navigated family gatherings by making myself invisible, carrying trays, refilling drinks, and listening. I listened to them talk about money they did not have. I listened to them talk about investments they did not understand. I listened to Madison talk about careers that required no work, only charisma. And while I listened, I observed. I saw the cracks in their logic. I saw the fragility of Deborah's control. I saw that for all their talk of being a strong family, they were a house of cards held together by denial and the exhausted efforts of people like me. I began to understand something that no business school would ever teach me as well as my family did. I learned that the people who scream the loudest about their own importance are usually the ones who are terrified they do not matter at all. And I learned that the person who holds the clipboard, the person who tracks the data, the person who knows where the bodies are buried and where the keys are kept, that person holds the real power. They just have to wait for the right moment to use it. back then, sitting on that beige sofa with my potato peeling award. I did not know I would one day run logistics for $1 billion company. I did not know I would be standing in a hotel ballroom with a CEO behind me. All I knew was that I was done being the extra hands. I was done being the footnote. I made a silent vow to myself, clutching that cheap wooden frame until my knuckles turned white. I promised myself that one day I would build a stage where I was the director, and on that stage, performance would matter more than blood, and competence would be the only currency that counted. But for a long time, the only thing I could do was wait and work and let them believe that the only thing I was good for was chopping onions. The summer I turned 19 was not defined by beach trips or internships, but by the smell of stale coffee and the hum of the fluorescent lights in a 24-hour convenience store. I had enrolled in the state university, the practical choice, the affordable choice, and to keep my student loans from swallowing me whole. I took the graveyard shift stocking shelves and selling lottery tickets to insomniacs. My world was small. It was textbooks, shift work, and sleep. I was tired, vulnerable, and trying desperately to be the responsible adult everyone said I should be. This is important context, because predators, even familial ones, do not hunt when you are strong. They hunt when you are exhausted. It started with a Sunday dinner. The roast chicken was dry, and the conversation was unusually focused on me. Aunt Deborah was pouring iced tea, her movements agitated and sharp. "Stella," she said, sliding a plate of corn toward me, "we have been thinking, it is so hard for young people to build credit these days. And with your parents' situation," she glanced at my father, who shrank into his chair, "they cannot really co-sign for anything meaningful for you." I chewed my food slowly. I knew there was a pitch coming. Deborah never offered sympathy without an invoice attached. "I have a solution," she continued, her voice dropping into that confidential, "we are in this together" register. "Madison and I are starting a little venture, a boutique, Hail and Glow Studio. It is going to be huge, but to get the best financing rates for the initial inventory, we need to show the bank a diverse family backing. If we open a joint credit line, a family trust line, essentially under your name, combined with ours, we get the student introductory rate." I stopped eating. "My name? It is just a formality." She waved her hand dismissively. "You do not have to do anything. We pay the bills. You just sign, and in return, your credit score skyrockets because we are paying it off every month. By the time you graduate, you will have a score perfect enough to buy a house. It is a win-win. We help you. You help us. That is what families do." I looked at my parents. My mother nodded encouragingly. "It sounds like a good opportunity. Stella, Deborah knows business, and you know we cannot help you build credit ourselves." I hesitated. My gut, honed by 19 years of being the helper, tightened, but I was tired. I was 19, and I wanted to believe that for once. They were including me in a plan to build something, not just to clean up after it. So I signed. 3 years later, the letter did not come in a gold-embossed envelope. It came in plain, terrifying white paper from a collection agency in Delaware. I was 22, weeks away from graduation. Sitting in my cramped dorm room, I opened the letter, expecting maybe a medical bill I had missed. The header read, "Notice of default and demand for payment." I scanned down to the bolded number, $35,422. I stopped breathing. The room spun. I read it again. The debt was attached to a credit line opened in my name for retail inventory and business expenses. The creditor listed a DBA Hail and Glow Studio. $35,000. That was more than my tuition. That was more money than I had ever seen in my life. I went to my laptop. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I pulled up the credit report I had never bothered to check because I trusted them. The history was a bloodbath. There were initial payments, yes, minimum payments made for the first 6 months, and then nothing. For 2 years, the account had been maxed out, accumulating interest, penalties, and late fees. The student introductory rate had exploded into a predatory variable APR because of the missed payments. I drove to Aunt Deborah's house. I did not call. I just drove. The house looked the same. The lawn was manicured. Madison's new convertible was in the driveway. A convertible. I was driving a sedan with a taped-up window. And she was driving a convertible while my credit report was bleeding out. I walked into the kitchen. Deborah was arranging flowers. She looked up, surprised by my sudden entrance. "Stella, what is wrong? You look pale." I slammed the collection notice onto the granite countertop. It made a sharp, slapping sound that silenced the room. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was not loud. It was trembling, but it was clear. "You said you were paying it. You said it was taken care of." Deborah picked up the paper. She put on her reading glasses. She did not gasp. She did not look horrified. She looked annoyed. "Oh, this," she said, tossing the paper back down as if it were a piece of junk mail. "I told them to stop sending these to your address. How unprofessional of them." "Unprofessional," I choked out. "Aunt Deb, it is $35,000. It is in default. They are threatening legal action. My credit score is destroyed." She sighed. The long-suffering sigh of a martyr dealing with an idiot. "Calm down. Stella, stop being so dramatic. The boutique had a rough patch. The market shifted. Madison tried her best. But retail is hard. We had to prioritize other expenses. The mortgage, the car payments. We could not pay everything. You prioritized the car." I pointed out the window at the convertible. "You bought her a car with the money you owed on my name." "It is a lease," Stella Deborah snapped, her mask of sweetness dropping. "And Madison needs to maintain an image for her career. You would not understand that. Look, it is just money. We will pay it back when things pick up. When things pick up." "It is in collections," I shouted. Deborah's eyes narrowed. "Listen to me. I have fed you. I have hosted you every Sunday for your entire life. I watched you when your parents were working. Do not come into my house and talk to me about debts. You owe this family more than money. Do not be a little bean counter. It is unbecoming." I looked at my parents, who had followed me in from the driveway. "Dad, Mom, say something." My father looked at his shoes. "Stella, honey, do not make a scene. Deborah said she will handle it." "But she is not handling it," I cried. "This ruins me. I cannot get an apartment. I cannot get a car loan. I cannot do anything. It is just a bump in the road," my mother said, placing a hand on my arm. "A lesson in resilience. We do not sue family. Stella, we do not drag names through the mud. Just let it go for now. Work hard, and it will sort itself out." I looked at them. I looked at the granite countertops, the fresh flowers, the expensive car in the driveway, and then I looked at the collection notice that represented 3 years of my future labor. They were not confused. They were not sorry. They simply did not care. To them, my financial ruin was an acceptable collateral damage for maintaining their lifestyle. I was the insulation in the walls of their comfort necessary, unseen, and meant to absorb the heat, so they stayed cool. If I sued them, I would have to testify against my own mother's sister. My parents would be ostracized, the family would fracture, and I would be the villain who broke the sacred bond. And practically speaking, litigation would freeze the credit line for years while the lawyers fought, leaving me with the bad score anyway. I realized then that there was no cavalry coming. There was no justice system for families like mine. I picked up the letter. I folded it neatly into thirds. "Okay," I said. Deborah smiled, relieved. "See, I knew you were sensible. We will figure it out eventually." I walked out of that house. I did not slam the door. I closed it very gently. That night, back in my dorm, I did not sleep. I sat at my desk and opened a new spreadsheet. I did not name it Family Debt. I did not name it Unfair. I typed the file name Operation Zero. I entered the total, $35,000. 422 hours. I broke it down. Interest rate, 24.9%. Minimum monthly payment to prevent legal action, $600. Projected time to pay off at minimum payment. Never. I needed money. Real money. Not convenience store money. I looked at the numbers. I stopped seeing them as a tragedy and started seeing them as a problem set, a logic puzzle. If the variable was income, I had to increase it. If the variable was expense, I had to zero it out. I stopped going to the movies. I stopped eating out. Even at the cafeteria, I picked up a second job answering phones for a logistics center on weekends. I started selling my notes to freshmen. That spreadsheet became my Bible. Every dollar I earned went into column B. Every payment to the collection agency went into column C. I watched the number in column D, remaining balance, shrink. Penny by agonizing penny. I did not speak to Aunt Deborah about it again. When I saw her at family gatherings, I smiled. I ate her potato salad. I listened to Madison brag about her new brand direction after the boutique failed. I nodded when they asked if I was still working all those crazy hours. Yeah, I would say, just saving up. They thought I was saving for a purse or a trip. They did not know I was buying my freedom. That $35,000 was not just a debt, it was the price of admission to the real world. It stripped away the last layer of my childhood naivety. It taught me that a contract signed in blood is still just a contract, and usually, the terms are worse. I looked at the spreadsheet night after night, the blue glow of the screen illuminating my face. I was not just paying off a loan, I was purchasing a new identity. Every $100 I sent to that bank was a brick in a wall I was building between me and them. This was not about forgiveness. This was about calculation. And I vowed that the next time my name appeared on a document next to theirs, I would be the one holding the pen, and the terms would be non-negotiable. The revenge did not start with a scream. It started with a cell in an Excel sheet, turning from red to black, to pay off a debt that wasn't mine. I took a job that nobody wanted. Riverline Supply Yard was not a place where careers were born. It was a place where inventory went to die. It was a sprawling concrete purgatory on the industrial edge of Columbus, a graveyard of shipping containers, pallets of drywall, and spools of industrial wire. The air smelled of diesel fumes and wet cardboard. The noise was a constant, grinding symphony of forklifts beeping and men shouting over the roar of engines. My official title was Front Desk Coordinator, which was a polite way of saying I was the human shield between the angry truck drivers and the incompetent management. The office was a glass-walled fishbowl in the center of the warehouse floor, coated in a permanent layer of dust. There was no software. There was no cloud. There was a whiteboard stained with the ghosts of erased markers from 3 years ago, and a desk covered in a blizzard of yellow sticky notes. Every day was a catastrophe. Drivers would arrive for pickups that weren't ready. Shipments would be dropped off at the wrong bay. Inventory counts were based on, I think I saw that in the back, rather than actual data. My boss, a man named Henderson, whose management style consisted entirely of hiding in his office and sweating, would just wave his hands at the chaos and yell, "Just fix it, Stella. Just make it work." So I did, not because I loved the job, but because I needed the overtime pay to feed the beast in my bank account, the $35,000 hole my aunt had dug. The turning point came on a Tuesday in November. It was freezing rain outside, and inside, the system had collapsed. 3 trucks were backed up at the loading dock, all scheduled for the same 200 p.m. slot, because Henderson had written it down on 3 different scraps of paper. Drivers were slamming their hands on my counter, cursing, demanding detention pay. I looked at the chaos. I looked at the piles of paper invoices, the frantic scribbles on the whiteboard, the absolute waste of time and fuel happening right in front of me. And something in my brain, the part of me that had categorized my father's receipts at age 12, snapped. I didn't quit. I stayed. After the last truck finally left at 8:00 p.m., I didn't go home. I locked the front door, turned on the coffee maker, and looked at the disaster on the desk. I started organizing. I took every single invoice, every bill of lading, every sticky note from the last month. I laid them out on the floor of the office like I was solving a murder case. I looked for patterns. I saw that supplier A was always late on Thursdays. I saw that Bay 4 was the bottleneck because the forklift turning radius was too tight for the larger pallets. I saw that the drivers hated the morning slots because the paperwork wasn't printed yet. I pulled out my laptop, my personal one, because the office computer was running an operating system from the dark ages, and I opened a blank spreadsheet. I didn't just type in numbers. I built a mirror of the warehouse. I created columns for inbound, processing, and ready for pickup. I used conditional formatting to turn cells red if a shipment was within 2 hours of its deadline. I created a simple lookup formula that matched driver names to their preferred bays. I assigned color codes to the urgency levels: green for standard, yellow for rush, red for manager intervention required. It took me 6 hours. By 2:00 a.m., my eyes were burning, but on my screen, the chaos of Riverline Supply Yard had been tamed into a clean, grid-lined reality. It wasn't just data, it was a map. The next morning, when Henderson waddled in, ready to scream about the previous day's mess, I turned the monitor toward him. "What is this?" he asked, squinting. "It is the schedule," I said, "and the inventory, and the driver logs." I printed out the manifest for today. Bay 1 takes the lumber. Bay 2 takes the PVC piping. The 10:00 a.m. truck is already pre-cleared. He looked at me like I had just performed a magic trick. That week, the yelling stopped. The trucks didn't back up. The drivers, rough men with calloused hands who usually treated me like a piece of furniture, started bringing me coffees. "Hey, Stella," a driver named Mike grunted one morning, sliding a Dunkin' cup across the counter. "That color-coded sheet you gave me yesterday saved me an hour at the weigh station. You keep that up? One afternoon?" Mike leaned against the counter and watched me navigate 3 different spreadsheets with rapid-fire keystrokes. "You know," he said, half joking, "if you ever walk out that door, this whole place burns down in 10 minutes. I didn't smile. I just kept typing. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it because every optimized minute was a minute I didn't have to deal with a crisis. And every crisis avoided was mental energy I could save for my own survival. Then, Northbridge happened. Northbridge Operations Collective was one of our newer clients, a tech-forward logistics startup that used Riverline as a regional transfer point. Usually, their representatives were just voices on the phone, complaining about our archaic processes. But one day, a man walked in. He wasn't a truck driver. He was wearing a fitted raincoat and carrying a leather messenger bag. He stood by the counter and watched me for a full 10 minutes while I coordinated a 4-truck swap, updated the digital inventory, and directed a forklift driver over the radio, all without looking up from my screen. When the rush died down, he stepped forward. "I am looking for the manager," he said. I pointed to Henderson's door. "He is in there." "No," the man said, shaking his head. "I mean the person who actually runs the floor. The person who built that tracking system you are using." I paused. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "That is just something I made, to keep track of things." The man extended a hand. "I am Ethan Cole, CEO of Northbridge. We have been trying to figure out why our error rates at this facility dropped by 40% in the last 2 months. Our data analysts thought it was a glitch. I came down here to see if it was real." He looked at my screen. "Can you show me how you structured the lookup fields for the cross-docking?" I blinked. Nobody had ever asked me about the structure of my work. They only cared about the result. But Ethan was looking at the formulas like they were poetry. I walked him through it. I explained why I linked the driver IDs to the bay numbers. I explained the logic behind the color coding. I showed him how I automated the email alerts for late shipments. By the end of it, he wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at me. "You are doing this in Excel?" he asked. "Yes. And you have no formal training in supply chain management?" "No, I just hate waste." Ethan nodded slowly. He took a card out of his pocket and placed it on the counter, right next to a grease-stained invoice. "We are a small team," he said. "We work remote. We help small businesses standardize their operations so they can scale. We have a lot of clients who are drowning in chaos, just like this place was. We need someone who can see the skeleton inside the mess." He looked me in the eye. "I cannot pay you a CEO salary yet, but I can pay you triple what you are making here to sit at that front desk. And I can promise you that at Northbridge, nobody will ask you to fetch them coffee." I looked at the card. It felt heavy in my hand. I started working for Northbridge 3 days later. The transition was not glamorous. I was still living in a cheap apartment with thin walls. I was still eating ramen noodles to maximize my debt payments, but my world had expanded. I worked from a second-hand desk in my bedroom, but on my screen, I was building empires. Ethan gave me raw, messy data from mom-and-pop manufacturers, boutique shipping firms, and local distributors. They were all like Riverline drowning in paper, losing money on mistakes, desperate for order. I took their chaos and I turned it into architecture. I taught myself Python because Excel was too slow for the datasets I was handling. I spent my nights on forums learning about SQL databases and API integrations. I learned about automation tools that could do the work of 3 people in a fraction of a second. I treated every client's business like a puzzle I had to solve. I didn't just fix their problems. I anticipated them. I built dashboards that told them they were running out of stock before they even knew. I created automated workflows that triggered invoices the second a delivery was signed for. For the first time in my life, my obsession with details wasn't an annoyance to the people around me. It was a superpower. At home, during the obligatory Sunday dinners, nothing changed. I was still Stella the quiet one, Stella the computer girl. "So, you are doing data entry now?" Aunt Deborah would ask, picking at her pasta. "Is that like typing?" "Sort of," I would say, not bothering to explain that I had just automated a supply chain for a tri-state medical distributor. "Well, as long as it pays the bills," she would sigh. "Madison is looking for investors for her new project. Real business is so capital intensive, you know." I would just nod and go back to peeling the potatoes or washing the dishes. But in my head, I was visualizing their lives as datasets. I saw their inefficiencies. I saw the entropy eating away at their success. One evening, about 6 months into the job, I was on a video call with Ethan. We were reviewing a complex integration for a new client. I had just walked him through a schematic. I designed a flow of information that moved from the warehouse floor to the billing department without a single human touch. Ethan sat back in his chair. He was silent for a moment. "You know," he said, "I have been calling you my assistant on the invoices." I tensed up. Was this the part where he told me I was overstepping, where he put me back in my box? "I think we need to change that," he continued. "You are not assisting anyone, Stella. You are designing the whole thing." He typed something into the company directory. On my screen, a notification popped up. Stella Fox System Architect. I looked at the title. Architect, not helper, not coordinator. Architect. Someone who builds, someone who creates the structure that holds the world up. You have a mind for the invisible. "Stella," Ethan said, his voice serious. "Most people only see the building. You see the girders. You see the load-bearing walls. That is not a skill you learn in school. That is instinct, and it is going to make you very dangerous one day." He didn't know how right he was. He didn't know about the debt, or the family, or the name tag waiting for me in the future. But he saw me. For the first time in my life, a man with power looked at me and didn't see a servant. He saw a peer. And as I looked at that new title on the screen, I felt something shift inside me. The shame of the debt was still there, heavy and cold. But now, it was accompanied by something else. Confidence. I wasn't just the girl who cleaned up messes anymore. I was the girl who could design a system so efficient that the mess couldn't exist in the first place. And if I could do that for a warehouse or a logistics network, imagine what I could do to a family that had built its entire existence on a foundation of lies. I closed my laptop that night, not with exhaustion, but with a strange, electric buzz in my fingers. I was ready to build, and I was ready to wait. 3 years is a long time in the world of logistics. In 3 years, you can rebuild a supply chain, you can bankrupt a shipping line, and you can turn a chaotic startup into a market leader. In 3 years, I had gone from answering phones at a dusty warehouse to managing the operational architecture for Northbridge's largest enterprise clients. My life had split into 2 distinct, non-overlapping realities. In reality A, I lived in a quiet, one-bedroom apartment in a complex that had a gate code and a gym I actually used. I had a savings account that was no longer gasping for air. I had a standing meeting every Tuesday with the CFO of a beverage company worth $400 million, who listened to my recommendations as if they were gospel. I was chipping away at the $35,000 debt my aunt had saddled me with, sending payments that were aggressive and consistent, like a metronome ticking down to freedom. In reality B, the reality that existed within the zip code of my family, I was still Stella the hermit. Stella who sat in her room. Stella who did something vague with computers that probably involved typing very fast for very little money. The disconnect was never sharper than it was during Thanksgiving dinner at Aunt Deborah's house. Thanksgiving in the Hale household was a contact sport. The air was thick with the smell of overcooked turkey, sage stuffing, and the sharp, acidic tang of cheap white wine. The television was blaring football in the other room, but nobody was watching it. The real action was at the dining table, where 20 people were crammed together, fighting for airtime. I sat near the end of the table, wedged between a cousin who was currently selling essential oils and an uncle who wanted to talk about his gallbladder surgery. I was wearing a silk blouse that cost $300, but nobody noticed the quality of the fabric. To them, it was just a shirt. The conversation, inevitably, drifted to the kids. So, Deborah said, tapping her wine glass with a fork to command attention, "Let us catch up. Madison, tell everyone about the new location." Madison lit up like a neon sign. She was sitting in the place of honor, naturally. "It is going to be amazing," she gushed. "We found this space in the Short North District. It is raw, industrial chic. We are calling it the Curated Loft. It is going to be a lifestyle experience, not just a store. We have investors who are really excited about the vision." Investors. I thought, taking a sip of water. I wondered if these investors knew about the credit default swap I was currently paying off for her last vision. That sounds incredible. "Sweetie," Deborah beamed, "a physical store, a place people can actually walk into. That is real business." Then, her eyes slid down the table and landed on me. The warmth in her face evaporated, replaced by that familiar, pitying curiosity. "And Stella," she said, her voice projecting loud enough to silence the gallbladder discussion. "What are you up to these days? Are you still, doing the online thing?" I put my fork down. I had rehearsed this. I always rehearse this. "I am working as a systems architect for Northbridge," I said clearly. "We optimize supply chains for mid-sized manufacturers. Basically, I analyze data to help companies move products faster and cheaper. I manage a team of 4 analysts now." The table went silent for a beat. Deborah blinked. She looked at me the way one looks at a dog that has just performed a card trick, mildly impressed, but mostly confused. "Systems architect," she repeated, testing the words like they were foreign food. "So you work on the computer, from home?" "Yes," I said. "I work remotely. But I travel to client sites when necessary. Just last week I was in Chicago meeting with—" She waved her hand, cutting me off. "Oh, honey, do not bore us with the technical details. It sounds exhausting, all those numbers, but it is good that you found something flexible, for people with your personality type." "My personality type?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Deborah said, leaning in, introverted. "Quiet. Some people just are not built for the hustle of the real world. They need to be behind a screen where it is safe. It is fine, Stella. We cannot all be front and center like Madison." A ripple of agreement went around the table. "Exactly," my Uncle Ron chimed in, chewing on a dinner roll. "It is a gig economy, right? Like driving Uber, but with data. It is good for now, Stella. But you should really look for something with a pension, something with a door you can walk through." I looked at them. I looked at Madison, who was nodding sympathetically. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull up my banking app and show them that my gig paid more in a month than Uncle Ron made in a quarter. I wanted to tell them that the numbers I worked with controlled the flow of goods for half the Midwest. I wanted to tell them that while Madison was playing store with mystery money, I was fixing the logistical infrastructure of actual businesses. But I didn't. Because I knew how this story went. If I argued, I was defensive. If I bragged, I was lying. If I showed them my pay stub, they would ask to borrow money. So I smiled. The smile was tight, but it held. It pays the bills. Aunt Deb, I said. She nodded, satisfied that she had correctly categorized me. Well, let us just hope it lasts. You know how these internet companies are. Here today, gone tomorrow. Unlike retail, people always need clothes. Madison raised her glass. To the curated loft. To the loft, the family cheered. I raised my glass. To the loft, I whispered, knowing full well that without a solid inventory management system, which Madison definitely did not have, the loft would be bankrupt in 6 months. Later, while I was in the kitchen helping to scrape plates because, of course, that was still my job. I overheard my mother talking to Deborah in the living room. I worry about her. Laura, I heard Deborah say. Her voice was low, the concerned matriarch tone. She is almost 30, no husband, no real career path. She just sits in that apartment with her laptop. It is not healthy. She has no business card, no title that anyone understands. Who is going to respect that? She is happy. Deb, my mother said, but her voice was weak. She sounded unconvinced. Is she? Deborah countered. Or is she just hiding? She has always been afraid of the spotlight. She is content with scraps. It is sad. Really. But at least she is not asking us for money. I stood there, holding a greasy roasting pan, feeling the cold ceramic of the sink against my stomach. She is content with scraps. The phrase bounced around my skull. It was the same thing they had said when I was 12. It was the same thing they said when I was 16. They had decided who I was before I even had a chance to speak, and no amount of success would change their minds unless it looked exactly like their version of success. I washed the pan, I dried it, I put it away. 2 days later, I was back in Reality A. I was on a video call with Ethan. We were finalizing a proposal for a trucking conglomerate that wanted to acquire a smaller fleet. The deal was worth $2.5 million annually to Northbridge. I had built the integration model that made the acquisition feasible. Ethan paused the screen share. He looked tired. He had been flying between New York and San Francisco all week. You are quiet today. Fox, he said, the holiday take it out of you? I shrugged, adjusting my headset. Just the usual family dosage. It has a half-life of about 48 hours. Ethan chuckled. He knew I didn't talk much about my family. He knew I had obligations, but he didn't know the details. Did you tell them about the promotion, he asked? Or the fact that you just saved the Detroit project from imploding? I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Ethan, if I told my aunt I saved a project in Detroit, she would ask if I drove the truck myself. They do not know what I do. He frowned. What do you mean, I mean to them? I am just the cousin who is unemployed. Or underemployed. I work on the computer. I help out. I am the family disappointment who pays her bills on time. Ethan looked at me for a long moment. He stopped shuffling the papers on his desk. They think you are unemployed, he asked. Essentially. I said, they think I am drifting, between things. Ethan leaned back in his chair. A strange look crossed his face, a mixture of amusement and something sharper, like a general spotting a weakness in the enemy line. You are the director of systems for a firm that just closed a 7-figure quarter, he said slowly. You hold the keys to half our client list. If you left tomorrow, our stock valuation would drop by 10%. And they think you are drifting. I picked up a pen and twirled it. Perception is reality. Ethan, in their world, if you do not have a storefront or a name tag, you do not exist. Ethan tapped his finger on his desk. That is interesting, he murmured. What is that you let them think that? He said. Most people would scream for validation. You are hoarding the truth like it is ammunition. I stopped twirling the pen. I realized he was right. I wasn't explaining myself because I was weak. I was not explaining myself because, on some subconscious level, I knew that the truth was more powerful if I kept it hidden until the perfect moment. It is not ammunition. Ethan, I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it, It is just easier. Ethan smiled. It was a wolfish smile. Well, he said, if they think you are nobody, then they will never see you coming. He went back to the proposal. But the conversation stayed with me. They think I am nobody. I looked at the second monitor, where a live map of the supply chain I managed was pulsing with green dots. Each dot was a truck, a shipment, a transaction I controlled. I was the invisible hand moving pieces across a board they couldn't even see. And Deborah. She was worried I didn't have a business card. I thought about the reunion that was coming up in a few months. I thought about the unemployed label she would inevitably assign to me. For years, I had thought the label was a cage. But as I sat there, watching the green dots move, I realized Ethan was right. It wasn't a cage. It was camouflage. Let them think I am the girl who eats scraps. Let them think I am the failure. Because when a failure walks into a room and buys the building, nobody knows how to react. I opened my personal finance spreadsheet. I looked at the debt column. It was down to $4,000. By the time the reunion happened, that number would be 0. And when I walked into that hotel ballroom, I wouldn't need to say a word. I would just need to wait for the door to open. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning, pinging into my personal inbox with the innocent chime of a calendar invite. The subject line was written in all capital letters, flanked by 2 siren emojis, official invitation, the Hale Fox Golden Jubilee Family Legacy Gala. It was my Aunt Deborah's masterpiece. For months, there had been whispers about how she intended to celebrate my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. Most families would have planned a backyard barbecue, or perhaps a nice dinner at an Italian restaurant. Deborah, however, had rented the grand ballroom of the Maple Crest Hotel and Conference Center. It was the kind of venue that advertised itself as luxury, but smelled faintly of chlorine from the adjacent indoor pool and used polyester table runners that sparked static electricity when you touched them. I opened the email. It was formatted like a press release for a royal coronation. There was a dress code section, which specified cocktail attire with a touch of gold. There was a rigid timeline that broke the evening down into 15-minute increments, including a slot for opening remarks by Deborah Hale, and another for Toast to the Future by the grandchildren, but the attachment was what made my stomach turn over. It was a 20-page PDF file titled The Hale Fox Legacy Booklet, Draft for Review. The body of the email read, Dearest Family, in honor of Mom and Dad's 50 years, I have compiled a booklet celebrating the achievements of all their descendants. This will be printed on high-quality cardstock and placed at every seat. Please review your bio and let me know if there are any typos. We want to inspire the younger generation. I clicked the file. I scrolled past the photos of my grandparents, past the glowing tribute to Deborah's own contributions to the PTA and the Homeowners Association. I scrolled past the cousins, the dentist, the teacher, the insurance adjuster, and then I found the section for the third generation. There was a photo of Madison, professionally retouched, looking over her shoulder with a dazzling smile. Her biography took up half the page. Madison Hale, creative entrepreneur and visionary, founder of the upcoming fashion destination, The Curated Loft, a rising influencer with a loyal online community. Madison is redefining retail for the modern woman. She is currently securing venture capital for her expansion into the downtown district. It was a masterpiece of fiction. Securing venture capital was code for asking her father for another loan. Loyal online community meant she had bought 5,000 bot followers on Instagram. I scrolled down to my name. There was no photo, just a generic gray silhouette placeholder, and next to it, the text was brief. Stella Fox, currently unemployed. Between things. Stella is taking time to find her path and currently assists with odd jobs online. She resides in Columbus and is still looking for a stable career direction. I stared at the screen. The hum of my high-performance laptop fan seemed to grow louder. Online odd jobs. It was not just an insult. It was a tactical strike. By printing this in a booklet that would be handed to every great-aunt, neighbor, and family friend, Deborah was cementing my status as the family charity case. She was making sure that no matter what I said at the party, The written record would declare me a failure. My first instinct was to close the laptop and walk away. But the systems architect in me, the part of my brain that fixed broken workflows, could not let an error of this magnitude stand in the documentation. I hit reply. I kept my tone cool, professional, and devoid of the rage that was currently heating my blood. Hi, Aunt Deb. Thanks for putting this together. There is a significant error in my bio. Please update it to the following: Stella Fox, Director of Systems Implementation. Northbridge Operations Collective. Stella oversees supply chain logistics and digital architecture for enterprise clients across the Midwest. Thanks, Stella. I hit send. I went back to my work. I was in the middle of a migration project for a client in Detroit, and I did not have time to dwell on Deborah's petty games. The reply came 20 minutes later. Stella, honey, I got your note. I think we need to be careful about using big, fancy titles that might confuse the older relatives. Director implies you have an office and a staff and a corporate headquarters. We do not want to mislead anyone into thinking you have a traditional career when we all know you are working from your living room computer. I think the current wording is more relatable. It shows humility. Besides, I have already sent the file to the printer to save on rush fees. We will keep it as is. Love you. I read the email 3 times. Don't want to mislead anyone. She was not worried about confusion. She was worried about competition. If I was a director, then Madison was just a girl with a failed store and a lease she could not afford. Deborah needed me to be the before picture so Madison could be the after. I started to type a furious response. I wanted to tell her that my living room computer managed more assets in a day than her husband managed in a year. I wanted to tell her that my staff consisted of 6 data analysts and 2 junior developers, but my phone rang. It was a video call from Ethan. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and answered. Ethan's face appeared on the screen, framed by the interior of a private airport lounge. He looked energized, which usually meant he was about to drop a massive workload on my desk. Fox, he said, skipping the hello. Good news. The board approved the expansion. We are officially opening the Midwest hub. I nodded, shifting instantly into work mode. That is great. Ethan, I have the preliminary site analysis ready. I was thinking Chicago or Indianapolis. No, Ethan said. We are going with Columbus. I froze. Columbus. The tax incentives are better, Ethan explained, pulling up a map on his shared screen, and it sits right at the intersection of the major freight corridors. We are going to lease a 20,000 square foot facility in the industrial park near the airport. He looked at me directly. And I want you to run it. Me, I asked. You are the only one who knows the architecture, Ethan said. I do not want to hire an outside operations director and spend 6 months training them. I want you on the ground. You will be the director of the Midwest hub. You will have a physical office, a local team, and full autonomy. I sat back in my chair. A physical office, in Columbus, but that is not all. Ethan continued. To make this work, we need a local logistics partner to handle the last-mile trucking while we build out our own fleet. I have been vetting companies in the area. We have narrowed it down to 1 finalist. Their metrics are average, but they have the capacity we need. He highlighted a name on the document he was sharing. Hale Freight Services. The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. Hale Freight Services. It was a mid-sized trucking firm, respectable but outdated. It was also the company where my Uncle Ron, Deborah's husband, had worked for 20 years. He was a regional manager there. I had listened to him complain about their dispatch software at every Thanksgiving dinner since I was 12. Ethan, I said, keeping my voice steady. I know that company. You do? Ethan asked. My uncle works there. I said, Ron Hale. He is in middle management. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Well, that is convenient. Or complicated, depending on how much you like your uncle. I did not answer that immediately. My mind was racing, connecting dots that had no business being on the same page. Uncle Ron, Hale Freight, the Midwest Hub, Northbridge, the reunion. I am flying out there next weekend to finalize the deal with their CEO, Ethan said, checking his watch. I want to sign the memorandum of understanding before the end of the month. I will be in Columbus on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, the date of the reunion. A slow, cold realization washed over me. Next Saturday, I asked. Yes, Ethan said. Is that a problem? I know you have family there. No, I said. It is not a problem. It is perfect. I looked at the email from Deborah still open in the background window. Currently unemployed, between things. Then I looked at the contract Ethan was showing me. Director of Midwest Hub, partnering with Hale Freight. Deborah wanted a narrative. She wanted a story about success and failure to present to the family. She had printed it on cardstock. She had set the stage. She had invited the audience. She just didn't realize that she had cast the wrong villain. Ethan, I said, a plan forming in my mind with the precision of a line of code. If you are coming to Columbus next weekend, you should come to the Maple Crest Hotel on Saturday evening. Why, Ethan asked. Because, I said, my uncle will be there, and if you want to understand the culture of the company you are about to partner with, you should see them in their natural habitat. Ethan looked at me. He saw the look in my eyes, the same look I had when I found a redundancy in a data set and prepared to purge it. You are up to something. Fox, he said. I am just organizing the logistics, I replied. After the call ended, I went back to Deborah's email. I did not type a furious response. I did not demand she change the booklet. I did not threaten to boycott the event. Instead, I typed a single line. You are right, Aunt Deb. The current wording is fine. See you on Saturday. I sent it. Then I walked over to my closet. I pushed aside the soft, comfortable clothes I wore for my remote work. I reached into the back and pulled out a garment bag I had not opened in 2 years. Inside was a charcoal gray suit. It was sharp. It was severe. It was the kind of suit you wore when you were coming to fire someone, or when you were coming to buy them out. I hung it on the doorframe. They wanted Stella the unemployed. They wanted Stella the background character. I would give them exactly what they asked for. I would wear their label. I would let them pin it to my chest. I would let them sneer and whisper and hand me their pity like stale crumbs. And then, when the time was right, when the lights were brightest and the audience was captivated, I would let my CEO walk through the door and burn their entire script to the ground. I looked at the PDF one last time. Stella Fox, currently unemployed. I smiled. Not for long. Aunt Deb, not for long. The transition from victim to strategist does not happen with a bang. It happens with the click of a mouse and the quiet hum of a printer in a glass-walled office. It started on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the reunion. I was sitting in the conference room at Northbridge HQ, a sleek, repurposed industrial space in Chicago, where the exposed brick walls cost more than my parents' house. We were going over the final compensation packages for the upcoming fiscal year. Marcus, our CFO, was running through the standard compliance checks for the senior leadership team. Since I was being promoted to director of the Midwest Hub, I was eligible for a significant tranche of stock options, equity, real ownership in the company I had helped build. Marcus stopped clicking through his slides. He looked at the paperwork, then at me, then at Ethan. Stella, he said, his voice neutral but professional. We hit a snag on your background financial clearance. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face still. A snag. There is an active credit line associated with your Social Security number, Marcus said. It is flagged as high risk. The entity is Hale and Glow Studio. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had paid that debt down to $4,000. It was almost gone. I had starved myself to fix it. It is almost paid off. I said quickly, I have been making payments for 3 years. That is not the issue, Marcus said, turning his laptop screen toward me. The issue is that the co-signer Deborah Hale attempted to increase the limit on the line of credit 48 hours ago. She applied for an extension of $20,000, using your credit history as the primary collateral. The room went silent. My aunt had tried to refinance my oppression. She saw that I had paid down the balance, opening up available credit, and she had immediately tried to fill it back up again. She did not just want me in debt. She needed me there. It was her piggy bank, and I was just the signature on the bottom line. I looked at Ethan. He was not looking at the screen. He was looking at me. I could have lied. I could have said it was a misunderstanding. I could have begged for time to fix it privately. But I looked at Ethan, the man who had taught me to see the architecture behind the chaos, and I realized that hiding this mess was exactly what Deborah wanted. Secrecy was the soil in which her control grew. So I told them. I told them everything. I told them about the coercion when I was 19. I told them about the boutique that never made a profit. I told them about the convertible, the threats, the emotional blackmail, and the years I spent eating ramen noodles to pay for a store I did not own. I spoke for 10 minutes. I did not cry. I did not tremble. I laid it out like a supply chain failure analysis. Here is the bottleneck. Here is the leakage. Here is the corrupt node in the system. When I finished, Marcus looked horrified. But Ethan looked like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. He did not offer me a tissue. He did not tell me he was sorry for my pain. He gave me something much better. He gave me the full weight of his corporate authority. "This stops today," Ethan said. He turned to Marcus. "Get legal down here." 10 minutes later, I was sitting with our general counsel, a woman named Sarah, who had previously worked for a firm that dismantled hedge funds. She listened to my story, took notes on a yellow legal pad, and then looked up with a smile that was terrifyingly sharp. "This is not a family dispute," Sarah said. "This is identity theft. It is financial fraud. And because you are a key executive at Northbridge, her attempting to leverage your credit puts our company at risk of compromise. That makes it my problem." She drafted the letter while I watched. It was a beautiful document. It was cold, precise, and devoid of any familial warmth. It listed the dates of every transaction. It calculated the interest I had paid over the years, money that should have been Deborah's responsibility. It cited 3 different sections of the Federal Trade Commission Act and 2 state laws regarding elder financial abuse and coercion of dependents. The letter demanded 3 things. 1. An immediate freeze on the credit line and a transfer of the remaining balance to Deborah's personal accounts. 2. A formal repayment plan to reimburse me for the $31,000 I had already paid. 3. A signed admission of liability. If these conditions are not met within 7 business days, the letter concluded, "We are prepared to file a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office and pursue civil litigation for fraud." Sarah printed it out. She handed it to me. "You send this," she said, "but you send it from your personal email. We will keep the Northbridge letterhead in reserve for round 2. Let her know you are not playing by her rules anymore." I went back to my desk. I scanned the document. I opened my email client. I typed in Aunt Deborah's address, the same address that had sent me the invitation to the reunion with the unemployed bio. I did not write a long, emotional paragraph about how she had hurt me. I did not ask her why she did it. I simply attached the PDF in the body of the email. I wrote 2 sentences. "Aunt Deb, please read the attached document carefully. This is the first and last time I will address this matter politely." I hit send. Then I went back to work. I had a logistics hub to build. The silence lasted for 6 hours. I knew she would not reply to the email. Replying would create a paper trail. Replying would mean admitting she had received it. Deborah operated in the shadows of plausible deniability. But I knew where the explosion would happen. At 7:45 p.m., my phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it began to vibrate continuously, dancing across my desk surface like an angry hornet. "Hail Family Connect group chat. 24 members." I picked up the phone. "Aunt Deborah. I am just so heartbroken tonight. You sacrifice everything for family. You feed them. You clothe them. You give them a home when they have nothing. And this is the thanks you get, Aunt Deborah. Some people get a little taste of the city life and forget where they came from. They forget who wiped their tears when they were children. Cousin Madison, Mom. What's wrong? You're crying, Aunt Deborah." "Nothing, sweetheart. Just the cruelty of ungrateful children. It hurts to see someone you love turn into a cold, calculating stranger over a little bit of money. Uncle Ron. We are a family. We forgive. But there are lines you don't cross. She was spinning the narrative. She was painting me as the aggressor, the greedy niece attacking the benevolent matriarch. She was rallying the troops, using vague emotional triggers to isolate me before I could even speak. In the past, this would have crushed me. I would have called her, crying, apologizing, begging her to stop saying those things to the family. I would have torn up the legal letter just to make the notifications stop. But I sat there in my office, looking at the glowing screen, and I felt nothing. No, that is not true. I felt something. I felt the cool, detached satisfaction of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. I did not type a defense. I did not leave the group. I took a screenshot of the chat. I took a screenshot of the timestamps. I opened a new email to Sarah, our lawyer. Subject: evidence of harassment. Potential defamation. Sarah, please add these to the file. Let me know if we need to send a cease and desist regarding public communication. I hit send. I was not dousing the fire. I was letting it burn so I could document who was holding the matches. Ethan walked by my office door a moment later. He saw me looking at my phone. He saw the flat, hard expression on my eyes. He stepped in and leaned against the doorframe. "They are reacting," he asked. "Predictably." I said, "They are playing the victim card." Ethan nodded. He walked over to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline. "Stella," he said quietly, "I need to ask you a question, and I need an honest answer." "Go ahead. What is the goal here?" he asked. "Is it just the money? Do you just want your $30,000 back? Because if that is it, I can write you a check right now as a bonus, and we can walk away. We can cut them off and never look back." I looked at him. I thought about the money. $30,000 was a lot, but it was not everything. Then I thought about the name tag, unemployed. I thought about the potato peeler award. I thought about the years of being told I was small, practical, and secondary. "No," I said, "it is not just the money." Ethan turned to face me. "Then what is it?" I stood up. I walked over to the whiteboard where I had mapped out the supply chain for the new hub. I looked at the intricate lines connecting suppliers to distributors. They have spent my entire life writing a story about me. I said, "They decided I was the failure so they could feel like successes. They decided I was the safety net they could walk all over. If I just take the money and leave, they will keep that story. They will say I was the greedy one who ran away." I turned to Ethan. "I want the money." "Yes. But more importantly, I want the pen. I want to take the pen out of their hands and rewrite the definition of who I am. And I want to do it in front of an audience." Ethan studied me for a long moment. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the same smile he had when we acquired a competitor. "So," he said, "we are not just looking for a settlement. We are looking for a correction of the record." "Yes," I said, "a public correction." Ethan pushed off the doorframe. "All right then. Director Fox, if we are going to rewrite history, we better make sure we have the documentation to back it up. Bring the file to the reunion. Bring the screenshots. Bring the contract." He checked his watch. "I will see you in Columbus on Saturday. Make sure your uncle is there. I have a feeling the negotiations for the trucking partnership are going to be vigorous." I nodded. As he left, I looked back at the group chat. Deborah was still typing, pouring out paragraphs of guilt-laden prose. "I just pray she finds peace," she wrote. "I pray she remembers that family is all we have." I put the phone down. She was right about one thing. Family was all she had, and she was about to find out exactly what happens when you try to defraud the only member of the family who knows how to conduct an audit. The plan was no longer about survival. It was about exposure. I was not going to the reunion to attend a party. I was going to deliver a performance review. Silence is usually a sign of surrender, but in my family, silence is merely the time it takes to reload the weapon. I waited 3 days for a response to the legal demand letter. I checked my encrypted email account every hour, expecting a counteroffer from a lawyer, or perhaps a hysterical voicemail from Aunt Deborah pleading ignorance. I expected a direct confrontation, but Deborah was too smart for a direct war. She knew she could not win in a courtroom where evidence mattered. She could not win against bank statements and notarized affidavits. So she did what she always did when her control was threatened. She moved the battlefield to a terrain where truth was irrelevant and perception was everything. She went to Facebook. It started on a Wednesday evening. I was in my apartment, reviewing the final architectural diagrams for the Columbus hub, when my phone pinged with a notification from a cousin I barely spoke to. It was a screenshot. I opened it. Deborah had posted a long, rambling status update. It was set against a background of storm clouds and a single, wilting flower. "Please keep my family in your prayers tonight." The post read, "It is so hard when you nurture a child, give them opportunities, and sacrifice your own financial security to help them start a life, only to have them turn around and attack you. I suppose it is true what they say about money changing people, especially when that money comes from questionable sources. It breaks my heart to see a young woman lost in the world of online work and debt, lashing out at the people who only tried to save her. We forgive, but we never forget." The comments section was a chorus of sympathetic gasps from the church group and the neighborhood watch. "Oh, Deborah, you are a saint for putting up with it. Is this about the niece? The one who never comes to Christmas praying for her soul? Addiction to that internet lifestyle is real." I stared at the screen. She was brilliant. She had not named me, which protected her from libel, but she had used enough specific keywords, niece, online work, debt, that everyone in our circle knew exactly who the villain was. She was preempting the lawsuit. If I sued her now, I would just look like the ungrateful, unstable girl attacking her savior. I did not comment. I did not react. I simply pressed the capture keys on my keyboard, saved the image to a folder titled Exhibit D, and went back to my diagrams. But Deborah was not done. 2 days later, the war arrived at my sanctuary. I was at my desk at Northbridge, deeply focused on a Python script that would automate the dispatch routing for our new fleet. The office was quiet, the hum of productivity filling the air. It was the one place where I was safe. It was the place where I was the architect. My desk phone rang. It was an internal extension. Stella. It was Elena, the Vice President of Human Resources. Her voice was tight. "Can you come to my office now, please? A summon to HR is never good. In most companies, it means you are being fired." My stomach gave a small, involuntary lurch, but I forced my breathing to remain even. I locked my computer, I stood up, and then I reached into my bottom drawer and pulled out a black binder. I had prepared this binder 3 days ago, the moment Deborah had posted that status. I knew her pattern. I knew that if she felt cornered, she would try to cut off my resources. She believed that if she could destroy my credibility, she could destroy the threat I posed. I walked into Elena's office. She was sitting behind her desk, looking uncomfortable. On her screen was an email. "Please, sit down," Elena said. She did not offer me water. "We received a concerning email this morning," she began, turning the monitor slightly so I could see. "It was sent to the General Ethics Hotline inbox. It is anonymous, but the details are specific." I looked at the email. The subject line read, "Urgent Employee Risk Assessment. Stella Fox. To whom it may concern. I am writing out of concern for your company. You employ a woman named Stella Fox. I believe you should know that the work she claims to do for you is likely a cover for serious personal issues. She has a history of significant gambling debts and financial instability. She has manipulated her family into taking loans to cover her losses, which she refuses to pay back. She is currently harassing elderly relatives for money. A person with this kind of ethical lack and desperate financial need should not be trusted with company data. Please investigate before she damages your reputation." Attached are screenshots of her abusive behavior. Elena clicked on the attachment. It was a screenshot of our family group chat, but it had been cropped. It showed only my messages short. Direct questions about the debt without Deborah's passive-aggressive provocations or the context of the fraud. It made me look cold, demanding, and irrational. Elena looked at me. "Stella, these are serious allegations. Financial instability and harassment are red flags for someone with your level of security clearance. Do you have anything to say?" I looked at the email. It was sloppy. The grammar was too emotional. The phrases elderly relatives and gambling debts were telltale Deborah-isms. She was trying to frame my payments to the collection agency as gambling losses. I did not panic. I did not cry. I did not shout that it was a lie. I placed the black binder on Elena's desk. I opened it to the first page. "Elena," I said, my voice calm and steady. I anticipated this. "What you are looking at is a retaliatory strike from a family member who is currently under investigation for identity theft and credit fraud against me." Elena blinked. "Excuse me?" I turned the page. "Here is a copy of the demand letter sent by our internal legal counsel 3 days ago. It details a $35,000 credit line opened in my name without my consent when I was 19. I turned the page again. "Here is the full, unedited transcript of the group chat from which those screenshots were taken. You will see that my harassment is actually a formal request for repayment of a debt that she admitted to in writing on November 14th, 2012. I turned the page one more time, and here is my credit report, showing 3 years of consistent, aggressive payments I made to clean up the mess she created. There is no gambling. There is no instability. There is only a victim who stopped being a victim and started being a systems architect." Elena stared at the documents. She read the lawyer's letter. She compared the chat logs. She looked at the timestamps. The tension in her shoulders dropped. She let out a long breath. "Jesus," she whispered. "This is your aunt." "Yes," I said. "She is attempting to leverage my employment to force me into silence. She thinks if she threatens my job, I will drop the fraud claim." Elena closed the email on her screen. She looked at me with a new expression. It was not suspicion anymore. It was respect. "You came prepared," she said. "I work in logistics." "Elena," I replied, "I always have a contingency plan." Just then, the door opened. Ethan walked in. He did not knock. He never knocked when it was his company. "Elena," he said, "I was copied on that ethics report. What is the status?" Elena held up the black binder. "False alarm. Ethan, it is a malicious attack. Stella brought receipts, literal receipts. It is a family dispute regarding identity theft. Stella is the plaintiff, not the defendant." Ethan walked over and picked up the binder. He flipped through it. He saw the letter from our legal team. He saw the unemployed bio from the reunion booklet that I had included in the back as context. He laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Gambling debts." Ethan read from the anonymous email. "That is rich. They think the woman who manages a $6 million budget to the penny is a gambler." He tossed the binder back onto the desk. "If her family thinks an anonymous email is enough to scare my HR department," he said, looking at me, "then they have clearly never met the kind of enemies I have dealt with. This is amateur hour." He turned to Elena. "Close the ticket, mark it as unfounded and malicious, and flag the sender's IP address. If they email again, have legal send a cease and desist for tortious interference with a business contract. Done." Elena said. Ethan signaled for me to follow him. We walked out of the HR office and down the hall to the executive suite. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving me feeling cold and sharp. "That was close," I said quietly. "No, it was not," Ethan corrected. "It was desperate. She is throwing rocks at a tank. Stella, she has no idea what she is hitting." He walked into his office and leaned against the glass wall, looking out at the city. "I changed my flight," he said suddenly. I stopped. "What, I am not flying into Columbus on Saturday," he said. "I am flying in on Friday. I want to be there a day early." "Why?" I asked. "The meeting with Hale Freight is not until Sunday. I am coming to the reunion," he said. I stared at him. "Ethan, no." "Why not?" "Because," I said, trying to find the words, "this is my mess. I am cleaning it up. I do not need you to swoop in and save me. I do not need the CEO to fight my battles. That just proves their point that I cannot stand on my own." Ethan shook his head. "You are missing the point. Fox, I am not coming to save you. You have already saved yourself. I saw that binder. You demolished them without raising your voice." He crossed his arms. "I am coming because you are the director of my Midwest hub. You are the architect of my entire logistics network. You are a high-value asset, and right now, there is a group of people attempting to devalue that asset by spreading lies that could impact our reputation in the local market." He stepped closer. "I am not protecting you from your mean aunt, Stella. I am protecting the largest investment my company is making this year, and that investment happens to be you." I looked at him. I saw the logic in his eyes. It was business, but it was also personal. He was angry on my behalf, even if he framed it as corporate strategy. "Besides," he added, a glint of amusement in his eyes, "I really want to see the look on your uncle's face when he realizes the unemployed niece is the one holding the contract that decides if he keeps his job." I hesitated. Then, slowly, I nodded. "Fine," I said, "but you are a guest. I am the one running the show. Understood?" "Director?" he said. I went back to my desk. I had one more task to complete. I called Sarah, our lawyer. "Send the second letter." I said. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "We usually wait for the deadline on the first one." "Send it," I said, "but change the terms." "Change them to what?" "Add a hard deadline." I said. "Tell them that if a signed confession and a repayment plan are not received by Saturday night at 9 o'clock, the file goes to the police on Sunday morning. Saturday night at 9 o'clock. That would be right in the middle of the speeches. Send it via courier." I added. "Make sure it requires a signature upon receipt. I want them to sign for it while they are setting up the balloons." "Done," Sarah said. That evening, the group chat lit up again. Deborah had obviously not received the response she wanted from the anonymous email. She had probably expected me to be fired, or at least called in for a panic attack. Instead, there was silence. So she escalated. "Aunt Deborah, I am just so excited for the reunion this weekend. It will be so good to see everyone. We have such a successful group of young people. Aunt Deborah, Stella. Honey, I know things are tough for you right now. I hope when you come on Saturday, you can just be honest with everyone. There is no shame in admitting you are struggling. We can't help you if you keep lying about these jobs you have. Just tell the truth. We love you anyway. Cousin Madison." "Yeah, Stella. Just be real. Fake it till you make it doesn't work forever." I looked at the message. "Hope you can be honest. Tell the truth." I typed a reply. For the first time in 10 years, I engaged. "Stella, I promise, Aunt Deb, I will be completely honest on Saturday." I put the phone down. They thought honesty was a confession of failure. They did not realize that honesty, when you have nothing to hide, is a blade. And I was sharpening it. I packed my bag. I put the black binder in. I put the unemployed name tag they had sent me in the mail, a cruel little preview, in the side pocket. I checked my flight status. Columbus, one way. I was going home. But this time, I wasn't going as the niece who peeled potatoes. I was going as the auditor, and the audit was about to begin. The Maple Crest Hotel ballroom smelled of chicken marsala sauce that had been sitting over a sterno flame for too long, mixed with the sharp, chemical scent of aerosol hairspray. It was the smell of a forced celebration. It was the smell of my family history compressed into 4,000 square feet of rented carpet. I walked through the automatic sliding doors of the lobby alone. I was wearing the charcoal suit. I had debated wearing something flashier, a red dress, perhaps, or the Italian silk blazer I had bought after closing the Detroit deal, but that would have been a mistake. A predator does not wear neon when it is hunting. I needed to be exactly what they expected. I needed to be plain. I needed to be gray. I needed to look like a woman who had bought her outfit at a discount store because she had an interview for a receptionist job on Monday morning. I carried no handbag, just my phone and the slim black leather folder tucked under my arm. Inside that folder was the contract that would determine the financial future of half the people in this room, but from the outside, it just looked like a resume. The check-in table was set up like a blockade at the entrance to the ballroom. It was draped in a gold polyester tablecloth that shimmered under the recessed lighting, and behind it, naturally, was Aunt Deborah. She was in her element. She was directing traffic, kissing cheeks, and handing out the heavy cardstock booklets she had spent weeks designing. When she saw me approaching, her smile did not falter. But her eyes did that familiar scan, checking my hair, my shoes, my lack of jewelry. She was assessing my market value and finding it comfortably low. "Stella," she cooed, reaching across the table but not quite touching me. "You made it. I was worried you might not be able to afford the gas." I smiled. It was a small, tight smile. "I am here. Aunt Deb." She reached into a plastic bin organized alphabetically. She pulled out my name tag. It was laminated. It had a safety pin on the back. "Here you go," she said, her voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper that was loud enough for the 3 cousins behind me to hear. I made sure to be accurate. "I know you're in a transition period. I did not want to put any pressure on you." I took the badge. Stella Fox, unemployed. Finding her path. I looked at it. I looked at the word unemployed, printed in a bold, sans serif font. It was an ugly word. It was a heavy word. But as I held it, I realized it did not feel heavy to me anymore. It felt like bait. I looked up at Deborah. I did not cry. I did not flush with shame. I simply pinned it to my lapel, right over my heart. "You updated it just like in the booklet," I said, keeping my voice light. "Very consistent. Aunt Deb." Deborah blinked. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. She had expected a protest. She had expected me to beg for a Sharpie to cross it out. My acceptance threw her off rhythm. "Well, yes," she stammered, recovering quickly. "Honesty is the best policy. Right? Go on in. Honey, you are at table 19. It is in the back, near the kitchen. I thought you would be more comfortable there with people who understand your situation." I took a booklet from the stack and walked into the ballroom. Table 19. I navigated through the round tables, dodging waiters carrying trays of water glasses. I passed table 1, where my grandparents sat like royalty. I passed table 2, where Madison held court, surrounded by her investors, mostly friends of my uncle who had no idea their money was about to evaporate. I found table 19. It was exactly what I expected. It was the island of misfit toys. Sitting there was Cousin Greg, who was going through his second divorce and currently living in his mother's basement. Next to him was Uncle Mike, who had been fired from the Ford plant 3 years ago and never quite recovered. And there was a folding chair for me, the unstable table. "Hey, Stella," Greg mumbled, nursing a beer. "You get the badge, too." He pointed to his chest, his red. "Greg Hale. In transition. At least yours sounds like a journey." I said, sitting down. "Mine sounds like a diagnosis." I opened the booklet. It was thick, printed on expensive glossy paper. On page 4, there was a collage of Madison. Madison smiling in front of a mirror, Madison holding a fabric swatch, Madison standing in front of an empty storefront with a caption that read, "The dream begins." I turned to page 12. There I was, the gray silhouette, the text. "Stella is taking time to find her path, helps with odd jobs online." I looked around the room. The lights dimmed. The chatter died down as a spotlight hit the small stage at the front of the room. A projector screen lowered, humming slightly. A slideshow began to play. It was set to a sentimental pop song about family and legacy. Photos of my grandparents flashed on the screen, young, happy, building a life, then photos of their children, then the grandchildren. Every time Madison's face appeared on the screen, which was often the room applauded. When a photo of me appeared, a grainy shot from high school where I looked awkward and tired, there was only polite silence. Deborah walked up to the microphone. The feedback squealed for a second before she tapped it. "Welcome, everyone," she said, her voice booming. 50 years. Can you believe it? 50 years of building this family. 50 years of success. She gestured to the room. "We have so much to be proud of. Look around you. We have doctors. We have lawyers. We have business owners." She pointed to table 2. "Madison, stand up, baby." Madison stood up. She waved, blowing kisses. "Madison is opening her first flagship store next month," Deborah announced. "She is showing us all what it means to be a Hale. Ambition, beauty, drive." The applause was raucous. Uncle Ron beamed, clapping his hands so hard they looked red. Deborah smiled. basking in the reflected glory. Then, her eyes drifted to the back of the room, to the shadows near the kitchen doors, to table 19, and we also have those who are still figuring it out, she said. Her tone shifted from pride to a syrupy, patronizing kindness. She looked directly at me. Stella, are you back there? Wave your hand. Honey, I did not wave. I just sat there, my hands folded on the white tablecloth. There she is, Deborah said, spotting me in the gloom. You know, folks, Stella is taking a long vacation from the workforce, a sabbatical. I think the young people call it, a ripple of laughter went through the room. But seriously, Deborah continued, leaning into the mic, if anyone here knows of a job opening something simple, low pressure, maybe data entry or filing, please let her know. We want to get her back on her feet. We are a family, and we help our own. Even when they are a little slow to launch. The laughter grew louder. It wasn't mean laughter. Mostly, it was the laughter of people who were relieved that they weren't the punchline. It was the laughter of people who believed the story because it made them feel superior. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a tight constriction of my heart muscle. It was the old shame, the 12-year-old girl who peeled potatoes trying to scream. But I picked up my water glass. I took a sip. The water was lukewarm. What is the goal, Ethan had asked me? To define yourself. I looked at Deborah on stage. She looked so powerful. She thought she held the pen. She thought she was writing the history of this family in real time. I set the glass down. I turned my head slightly to the right. The ballroom was separated from the adjacent conference room by a movable partition wall. There was a gap in the partition, just a few inches wide. Through that gap, I could see a banner standing in the hallway of the other room. It was a blue and silver banner. Midwest Supply Chain Logistics Summit. Sponsored by, and there, at the top of the list, was the logo, a stylized geometric compass. Northbridge Operations Collective. My world was 50 feet away. My real life was right on the other side of that wall. The irony was so sharp it almost tasted like metal. They were mocking me for being unemployed while I was the headline sponsor of the event next door. My phone vibrated on the table. I glanced down. Sender Ethan Cole. I'm in the parking lot. We just pulled up. Are you sure about this? I looked at the screen. I looked at my Uncle Ron, who was laughing at a joke someone made about millennials not wanting to work. I looked at Deborah, who was now talking about the importance of financial responsibility. I picked up the phone. I typed with one hand, keeping my eyes on the stage. Stella. The stage is set. Just walk in. Deborah was wrapping up her speech. All right, everyone. Before we start the dinner service, we want to get the official family photo. Can I get all the grandchildren up here on the stage? Please. Chairs scraped against the floor. The cousins stood up. Madison smoothed her dress and practically ran to the front. The doctor cousin, the lawyer cousin, they all moved with the confidence of the chosen. I stood up. I walked from the back of the room, the long walk of shame. I could feel their eyes on my suit. So plain, so boring. When I reached the stage, the photographer was arranging people. Okay, tall ones in the back, short ones in the front, he shouted. Deborah stepped in. She grabbed Madison's arm and pulled her to the dead center. Madison needs to be in the middle, Deborah directed, with the grandparents. Then she looked at me. I was standing near the edge, next to Greg. Actually, Deborah said, waving her hand at us. Stella. Greg. Can you two stand a little further to the left? Just a bit more to the outside. Why, Greg asked. Just for composition, Deborah said, her voice tight. And well, in case we need to crop the photo later for professional updates, we want the core group in the center. Easier to crop. She was literally editing us out of the family history before the shutter even clicked. She wanted a version of this photo where the failures could be sliced away, leaving only the perfection she had manufactured. I looked at her. Okay, Aunt Deb, I said. I stepped to the left. I stepped so far to the left that I was almost off the riser. I was standing right next to the double doors that led to the main corridor, the doors with the frosted glass panels. The room was quiet, waiting for the flash. Creating memories. Deborah chirped, Everyone say legacy on 3, 1, 2. The heavy brass handle of the double door next to me turned. It was a sharp, mechanical sound that cut through the silence. The door didn't just open, it was pushed open with force. A beam of light from the hallway cut into the dim ballroom. Ethan Cole stepped through the doorway. He was not alone. Flanking him were two men in dark suits, carrying briefcases, our corporate legal counsel. And behind them, looking terrified, was the general manager of the Maple Crest Hotel. Ethan looked like a storm front moving across a prairie. He was wearing a tuxedo immaculate, tailored, and far more expensive than the entire wedding budget of my grandparents 50 years ago. The photographer lowered his camera. Deborah froze, her mouth still half open to say, legacy. Ethan did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the decorations. He looked straight at the stage. He walked past table 19. He walked past table 2. The sound of his dress shoes on the dance floor was a rhythmic, terrifying clack, clack, clack. He stopped at the base of the stage. He looked up. He didn't look at Madison. He didn't look at Deborah. He looked at me. Director Fox, he said. His voice was deep, resonant, and projected to the back of the room without a microphone. I am sorry to interrupt the photo session, but we have a situation. The room was so silent you could hear the hum of the refrigerator units in the kitchen. Deborah stepped forward, her face flushing red. Excuse me, she demanded. Who are you? This is a private event. You cannot just barge in here. Ethan ignored her. He kept his eyes locked on mine. The Hale Freight negotiation just stalled. He said to me, their CEO is in the conference room next door. He says he cannot agree to the compliance terms for the new hub unless the director signs off on them personally. He paused for effect. They are waiting for you. Stella. We cannot close the $20 million contract without your signature. A gasp went through the room. It wasn't a ripple. It was a wave. $20 million. I saw Uncle Ron stand up at his table, his fork clattering onto his plate. He knew that number. He knew that deal. He had been talking about the big contract for weeks, terrified his company wouldn't get it. I looked down at Ethan. I looked at the shocked faces of my cousins. I looked at Deborah, who looked like she had just been slapped with a wet towel. I unpinned the name tag from my lapel. Stella Fox, unemployed. I held it in my hand for a moment. Then, I dropped it. It fluttered down from the stage and landed at Ethan's feet. I think we can crop this photo later, I said to the room. I stepped off the stage. Lead the way. Mr. Cole, I said. And for the first time in my life, I walked through the center of the room, and nobody was looking at Madison. The moment I stepped off the stage, the air in the ballroom shifted. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was the kind of vacuum that precedes a shockwave. I walked toward Ethan Cole, my heels clicking rhythmically on the parquet floor. He stood there, flanked by our corporate counsel, Sarah, and a man I recognized instantly, Jim Miller, the CEO of Hale Freight Services. Jim looked like a man who had just won the lottery but was terrified of dropping the ticket. He was sweating slightly in his ill-fitting tuxedo, clutching a leather portfolio as if it contained nuclear codes. Behind them, I saw the double doors still swinging slightly. The banner for the logistics summit was visible through the gap, a bright blue beacon of my real life bleeding into this sepia-toned nightmare. Ethan extended his hand. He didn't offer a polite, social handshake. He offered the firm, decisive grip of a partner closing a deal. Director Fox, he said, his voice carrying clearly to the back of the room where my cousins at table 19 were standing with their mouths open. I apologize for the intrusion, but Mr. Miller insisted on meeting the architect of the new integration before the ink was dry. Jim Miller stepped forward. He looked past my charcoal suit. He looked past the lack of jewelry. He looked straight at me with eyes full of desperate respect. Ms. Fox, Jim stammered, shaking my hand vigorously. It is an honor. Truly. Your predictive modeling for our fleet utilization, it is brilliant. We have been trying to solve that routing problem for a decade. You fixed it in a week. I smiled. It was the smile of a professional who knows exactly what she is worth. Thank you. Mr. Miller, I said, I look forward to leading the transition. We have a lot of work to do to get your systems up to Northbridge standards, but I'm confident we can make it happen. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Uncle Ron, Deborah's husband, the man who had spent 20 years in middle management at Hale Freight, complaining about corporate, was pushing his way through the crowd. His face was a mask of absolute confusion. "Jim," he called out, his voice cracking. "Mr. Miller." "What are you doing here?" Jim turned, surprised to see his employee. "Oh, Ron, I did not know you were here." Ron pointed a shaking finger at me. "Are you talking to Stella? But she is unemployed. She is just helping out with some computer stuff online." Jim frowned. He looked at Ron like he had just spoken in tongues. "Unemployed." Jim repeated, "Ron, are you insane? This is the director of the new Midwest hub. She is the one who just approved our partnership contract. If she hadn't signed off on our compliance audit this morning, you and I would be looking for new jobs next month." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. For 20 years, Ron had been the successful one, the provider, the man with the stable job, and in 3 sentences, his boss had just revealed that his entire professional future rested in the hands of the niece he had pitied over potato salad. I turned to look at the stage. Aunt Deborah was standing there, frozen. The microphone was still in her hand, but it was dangling by her side. Her face had drained of color, leaving her rouge standing out like clown makeup. Madison was standing next to her, looking from me to Ethan to the investors at table 2. Realizing that the spotlight had just been violently ripped away, Ethan took a step forward. He reached out and picked up the laminated badge I had dropped. Stella Fox, unemployed. He looked at it, then looked at the crowd. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Unemployed?" he asked, holding the badge up like a piece of evidence in a murder trial. That is a fascinating administrative error. In the conference room next door, 500 industry leaders know this woman as the person who holds the keys to the regional supply chain. He walked over to the buffet table. He placed the badge gently on a tray of deviled eggs. "I think we can retire this," he said. "It does not fit the dress code of a director." Deborah snapped out of her trance. She scrambled off the stage, her heels catching on the carpet. She rushed toward us, her eyes wide and panicked. She didn't look at Ethan. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep with a desperation that hurt. "Stella," she hissed, pulling me a few feet away. Her voice was a low, trembling whisper. "What are you doing? Why did you bring them here? Why didn't you tell me?" I pulled my arm away. I adjusted my jacket. "I did tell you." "Aunt Deb," I said calmly, "I sent you an email. I told you my title. You told me it was too confusing for the family. You told me not to mislead anyone." Deborah's eyes darted around the room. People were watching. The cousins were whispering. The investors were looking at their phones, probably Googling Northbridge. "You are humiliating me," she whispered, tears of rage welling in her eyes. "In front of everyone, on your grandparents' anniversary. How could you be so selfish?" Selfish, I repeated the word. It tasted like ash. I stepped closer to her. "You labeled me unemployed to make yourself feel bigger. Deborah, you used my name to open a credit line for a store that failed because you needed to play business owner. You let me eat ramen for 3 years to pay for a convertible I never drove. And when I tried to fix it quietly, you went on Facebook and called me a gambling addict." I gestured to the room. "I didn't humiliate you, Aunt Deb. You built this stage. You wrote the script. I just decided to stop playing the extra." While we were speaking, Sarah, our corporate attorney, had quietly opened her briefcase. She walked up to us. She didn't look aggressive. She looked bored, which was far more terrifying. "Mrs. Hale," Sarah said, extending a blue folder. Deborah stared at it. "What is this?" "That is a formal repayment agreement," Sarah explained, her voice carrying the cool authority of the law. "It details the $35,000 of unauthorized credit you leveraged in Ms. Fox's name, plus interest. It also includes a retraction statement for the defamatory comments you made on social media regarding her employment and character." Deborah recoiled, as if the folder was radioactive. "I am not signing that. This is a family misunderstanding. It ceases to be a family misunderstanding when it crosses state lines and involves the credit history of a corporate officer. Sarah said, "You have two choices. You can sign this tonight, agree to the payment plan, and we keep this civil. Or, my next call is to the Franklin County District Attorney's Fraud Division. Given the paper trail we have, including the chat logs where you admitted to the debt, I suspect they will be very interested." Deborah looked at Ron. Ron looked at Jim Miller. Jim Miller looked at me with respect. There was no help coming. The family she used as a shield had evaporated. Madison, who had been watching from the stage, suddenly burst into tears. It was a loud, theatrical sob. "Mom," Madison wailed, "you said you paid that off. You said the boutique money was a gift." The room turned to Madison. Deborah's face crumbled. The mask of the benevolent matriarch, the successful planner, the keeper of the legacy had all dissolved, revealing a terrified woman who had spent decades spending money she didn't have to impress people she didn't like. I looked at her. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound sense of lightness, the weight of their judgment, the weight of their expectations, the weight of that damn debt. It was all gone. I turned away from her. I walked to the center of the room. I picked up the microphone Deborah had abandoned on the podium. The feedback whined for a second, then cleared. I looked out at the faces of my family. I saw the cousins at table 19 sitting up straighter. I saw my parents, huddled in the back, looking terrified but also proud. "I'm not going to give a speech," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't shake. "I just want to clear up the bio in the booklet." I held up the glossy program. "I am not finding my path. I found it a long time ago. I just didn't tell you because I learned early on that in this family, success is only celebrated if it belongs to certain people. If it belongs to the rest of us, the quiet ones, the practical ones, the ones you call unemployed, it is treated as a threat." I looked at the camera on a tripod that was live streaming the event to the extended family Facebook group. I looked right into the lens. I paid off a $35,000 debt that wasn't mine, so that I wouldn't have to ruin this family's reputation. I stayed silent for years because I was afraid of being called ungrateful. But I realized something tonight. I paused. You do not owe anyone your life just because they share your DNA. You do not owe them your silence, and you certainly do not owe them your dignity. If someone loves you, they don't ask you to make yourself small so they can feel big. I put the microphone down. It made a solid thud on the podium. I walked off the stage. I walked past Deborah, who was now holding the blue legal folder with trembling hands, whispering furiously to Ron. I walked past Madison, who was sitting on the edge of the stage, mascara running down her face, realizing that her investors were quietly slipping out the back door. I walked toward the double doors. Ethan was waiting for me. He held the door open, ready to get back to work. "Director," he asked. I looked back one last time at the ballroom. The gold balloons looked cheap. The food looked cold. The people looked small. "Yes," I said, "I am ready." I walked through the doors, out of the dim, suffocating ballroom and into the bright, clean light of the hallway. Behind me, I heard footsteps. It wasn't Deborah. It wasn't Ron. It was Greg, and the cousin who sold essential oils, and two of the younger teenagers. They followed me out. "Hey, Stella," Greg called out, looking at me with wide eyes. "So this remote work thing, do you guys hire people who you know are willing to learn?" I stopped. I looked at Greg. I saw the same desperation in his eyes that I had felt in the warehouse 5 years ago. I looked at Ethan. He nodded slightly. "Send me your resume." "Greg," I said, "no promises. But if you can pass the aptitude test, we are building a team." I turned and walked toward the exit, the contract with Hale Freight tucked firmly under my arm. We walked out to the parking lot. The night air was cool and smelled of rain. It smelled clean. I sat in the back of Ethan's town car. The leather was soft. The city lights of Columbus slid past the window, not a prison anymore, but a landscape I controlled. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed against cold plastic. I pulled out the name tag. Unemployed. I looked at it one last time. I thought about the girl who peeled potatoes. I thought about the girl who stocked shelves at midnight. I thought about the girl who built a cathedral out of spreadsheets. I rolled down the window. The wind roared into the car. I tossed the badge out. It tumbled into the darkness, bouncing once on the asphalt before disappearing under the wheels of the traffic behind us. I rolled the window up. I sat back. And for the first time in 10 years, I didn't just feel safe. I felt free. This wasn't just revenge. Revenge keeps you tied to the past. This was an eviction. I had finally evicted them from my head. And the rent was overdue. Thank you so much for listening to Stella's story. It is a story about breaking free from the labels others try to pin on us. I want to hear from you. Where are you listening to this story right now? Are you on your commute? Are you at the gym? Or are you, like Stella, working late on a dream that nobody else sees yet? Please leave a comment below and let me know. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help us push this video out to more people who might need to hear that they are more than the label on their chest. See you in the next story.